Here on Craft Computing, I am a huge fan of small form factor PCs and cramming as much power into as small a space as possible. So when there's a brand new graphics card release, the question I always ask is, how small of a space can I fit it in? Today, I'm going to try to answer that question with the RTX 5090. How small of a case can we possibly fit this 600 watt behemoth into, and can we even keep it cool? Welcome back to Craft Computing, everyone. As always, I'm Jeff. So the objective of this video is pretty simple. Find out how small of a case can we possibly fit the all-new RTX 5090 into. Now, the RTX 5090, like the two previous generations, presents a little bit of a difficult issue for small form factor cases, mainly that trademark blow-through cooler design. See, if I were to simply mount the RTX 5090 onto a motherboard in a small form factor case and then exhaust 600 watts of hot air into the CPU compartment, things wouldn't be too happy. Likewise, even if I mounted it sideways, so let's take the motherboard right here and let's do a vertical orientation with this, unless the case is vented from both sides, the RTX 5090 is just going to suffocate. You have to have an open path of air on both sides of this GPU in order for the cooling to actually work. Now, over the past year or so, I have been a huge fan of the Fractal Design Terra as a very compact ITX build. However, it is exactly what this build is about, where you cannot put the RTX 5090 into that case because the power supply sits directly behind one of the fans. That would mean 600 watts of exhaust heat is going to go directly into the power supply. And that's a recipe for disaster. With all that said, I think I found the perfect case and orientation for the RTX 5090, and it is the Fractal Design Ridge. Now, I have previously built in a Fractal Design Ridge, and I really like the overall design. It holds the card vertically in orientation to the motherboard, but the best thing about this is it is vented on both sides with 140mm fans on one side of the GPU, which means we can absolutely get all of that waste heat out of the case the most efficient way possible. Now, obviously, the RTX 5090 also needs a quite substantial power supply in order to feed it 600 watts. That's why I've decided to go with the Cooler Master SFX 1100 watt. This thing is an absolute beast. It's not even an SFX-L power supply. It is a standard SFX size supply with 1100 watts with a 600 watt 12 volt high power connector. This thing is absolutely insane, and I can't wait to see what it does inside of this system. Incidentally, I already know this is probably going to work just fine because I did all of my benchmark testing for the entire RTX 5000 series on this power supply, so I've got a good feeling about this. And finally, what platform did I choose for this system? Well, this one is a little bit out of left field, but follow me, I do have my reasons. This is the Minis Forum BD790i, an ITX motherboard with a soldered Zen 4 mobile CPU. Underneath this pretty unassuming heatsink is a Ryzen 9 7945HX, a Zen 4 CPU with 16 cores and 32 threads with a max boost clock of 5.4 GHz. Best of all, this package draws just 75 watts at its max TDP. Now, I definitely could have opted to go with an AM5 based system and a 9800X3D, but I wanted to see what this low power option would actually do when paired with an RTX 5090. With 16 cores and 32 threads, I think we're still going to have more than enough performance for the RTX 5090. And I am a little curious to see what actually is the difference between running this on a 9800X3D or more of a basic platform that's significantly less expensive. Remember, the 9800X3D costs $450 by itself. This motherboard with the entire package is $399. As for filling out the rest of the platform, we've got 64GB of Patriot DDR5 5600 memory in dual channel, and a pair of Western Digital SN770 drives. One a 500GB for a boot disk, and the second a 2TB for all of our games and storage. So that's the gist of the build. Let's see if we can get this thing together, fire it on, and see what kind of performance we're looking at. I've got to say, this has been one of the least dramatic small form factor builds that I've ever attempted. Any ITX system I've tried to build in the past usually involves at least 2 or 3 next day Amazon deliveries for fan splitters, or heat sinks, or memory because of clearance issues, or different length cables. But no, everything that I had laid out on the table before this video is what went into this case. Absolutely no more and no less. The RTX 5090 fit very easily into the top section of this case, and we still had room to keep the dual 140mm fans, something that I desperately wanted to keep to assist with getting 600 watts worth of heat pushed through the card and out the other side. As for the motherboard side of the equation, again, installation was basically drama-free. Cabling was all easy to route, and the only oddity was that I routed the EPS power cable under the motherboard, as there's really no room to plug it in with the power cable pass-through down here. But that's not exactly an unconventional way to route the EPS cable in small form factor builds like this. One thing I will say is I am very glad I opted for the Cooler Master SFX 1100 watt power supply. An SFX L power supply would have been significantly more cramped, and I'm not sure if I would have been nearly as happy with the results there. But fitting all of the components into the case and making it look good is only part of the equation. How well does the PC actually perform, and more importantly, is it able to stay cool? First off, I'm running the latest 1.09 version of the BIOS on the Minis Forum BD790i motherboard, and it includes a couple options for TDP adjustments. Prior versions were only adjustable between 55 and 65 watts, which is the stock configuration for the Ryzen 7945HX onboard. This new version unlocks the 75 watt TDP setting, which I would have been happy with on its own, as it's technically the highest supported power spec from AMD for this chip. But enabling 75 watt mode does let the boost functionality run basically indefinitely with no timer, meaning that as long as you have sufficient cooling, the CPU will happily pull down 100 watts of power along with a much faster clock speed to go along with it. One issue that I did run into is the stock fan curves on this board are very conservative. I'm sure they would work great at the 55 watt TDP setting, but when we're pulling nearly double that out of the CPU at 100 watts, the fans do need to speed up a little bit more than they'd like to. After a quick tune, we went from hitting 90 degrees Celsius on the regular to settling in at just 72 to 76 degrees Celsius under full load. Cinebench R23 even managed to hold a 4.3 GHz boost clock on all 16 cores while sitting at around 75 degrees Celsius. Pretty impressive for such a small package. But of course, the main star of the show is upstairs in the RTX 5090, and is it actually able to stay cool in the very slim Fractal Design Ridge? I'm going to say yes, if you take the 5090 out of the box, slap it into the Ridge, and call it a day. Without any tweaking at all, including running the pair of 140mm fans behind the card at just 800 RPM, which is their stock setting, the 5090 does climb all the way to 86 degrees Celsius on the core, and close to 98 degrees Celsius on the memory. Definitely a bit warm for my liking, but it was able to hold over 2.5 GHz on the core, so technically it still ran at full speed the entire time. If I take the side panel off the case, like I have right now, that did drop the temps back down to a reasonable range, with the GPU core sitting at closer to 81 degrees Celsius and memory closer to 92. But I haven't ran a PC with the side panel off in nearly 20 years, and I'm not about to break that streak. Playing around a bit with GPU tweak, I was able to undervolt and downclock the card, resulting in some pretty fantastic performance and temperature improvements, even with the case completely closed. I limited the card to a boost clock of around 2350 MHz, so around a 200 MHz reduction from its max speed, along with dropping around 35 millivolts off the core voltage. That actually resulted in dropping overall power use by nearly 80 watts in games, from around 520 watts at peak to just 440 watts. But temperatures also fell all the way down to just 72 degrees Celsius on the core, with memory coming in at around 80 degrees. That is a fantastic improvement, and now she can run all day long with the side panels both firmly in place. Finally, we come to performance. Now, I didn't run a complete set of benchmarks, but I did do some spot checking at 4K, with both the RTX 5090 at stock settings, as well as my roughly 10% underclock, and the results are pretty great. You might think I'd be at a massive disadvantage being on a Zen 4 mobile CPU compared to the 9800X3D. But in reality, I still have 16 Zen 4 cores, and the small form factor box comes in at only around 5% slower at stock settings, and only around 11% slower once it's underclocked. While 11% off the 9800X3D might seem like a massive performance loss, keep in mind this is still running about 20% faster than a 9800X3D with a 4080 Super. And this box is pulling only around 600 to 620 watts from the wall at full tilt, thanks to the sub 100 watt Zen 4 mobile CPU, along with the 425 to 440 watt tune on the RTX 4090. So yeah, overall, I am thrilled with the way this system turned out. It looks beautiful, it's fairly lightweight, it runs like a bat out of hell, and it runs extremely cool. We got the GPU to run at just 72 degrees Celsius. That's insane for a system of this size with this much power output coming out of it. I'm already thinking about a couple things that I can do to tweak it to make it even better. One of the first things that I want to do is actually a bit of a case mod. I want to add an LCD of some kind to the front of this case to display system stats like temperature and utilization while I'm gaming. Let me know if that's something you'd like to see in a future video. On your way down there, don't forget to drop this video a like and subscribe to Craft Computing if you haven't done so already. And while you're at it, head on over to craftcomputing.store and grab some of my merch. All of it is handcrafted and made to order in-house by me. I make my own pint glasses, whiskey stones, coasters, all of it right here in-house. In my highly biased opinion, it's some of the best and unique merch that you can pick up from a tech tuber. So go pick some up and help support the channel. And that's going to do it for me in this one. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next video. Cheers, everyone. Well, I'm glad I caught that early. I forgot to hit record on the camera, and I've already poured the beer, but that's literally all I've gotten through. Beer for today is from Cape May Brewing from Cape May, New Jersey. It is the Coastal Evacuation Double IPA, clocking in at 8%. Coastal Evacuation. It's a phrase that's everywhere at the Jersey Shore. This West Coast style double IPA, okay then, is as big and as bold as hurricane season itself, with the Centennial Forward Brazen blend of hops, serving up hints of orange citrus and honeydew melon. It's time to evacuate. Are you prepared? First off, the Oregon and Washington coastlines are also full of tsunami evacuation routes and coastal evacuation signs and things like that. So that's something I'm very familiar with, even though we don't get hurricanes over here. We do live on the Ring of Fire, and so there's always earthquakes and tsunami warnings and things like that. Secondly, they're going for West Coast IPA. This is not a West Coast IPA. This is solidly a New England IPA. I'm not even sure how they could say that with a straight face. This is a hazy IPA through and through. I will say, it is very big. It is very bold. I mean, it is 8%. It's not a lightweight beer. But it's a beer that still punches even above that weight class. This is up there with some of the 10% IPAs that I've had. I think the hazy little thing from Sierra Nevada or Ninkasi's Megalodon. Those come to mind. The triple IPA, 9.5, 10%ers. This is right in there with that conversation, but at only 8%. As for the flavor, they say hints of orange citrus and honeydew melon. I'm getting the honeydew, but I'm digging, and I'm not finding the orange. Maybe they meant orange, and I'm just not tasting that. But I'm not getting any orange from this at all. It's warmer than an orange. I don't know how else to describe that. It's not super bitey, high-end, piney, orange, pineapple citrusy. It's a deeper, richer flavor than that. Regardless of this not being a West Coast IPA, it solidly being a New England hazy, I like it. I really, really enjoy this one. Like I said, it is big, it is bold, it punches you in the face. If you like IPAs that are huge, thick, cut it with a knife, this is one that should be on your short list to find. It's pretty fantastic.